So here I am in legendary Argos, Greece. This city has been occupied for 7,000 years. That makes it the oldest continuously occupied city in Europe, possibly the world, certainly the first or second. But the big question is it worth visiting? Well, the short answer is if you're in the area, perhaps. We're located about 12 kilometres from Nafplio, which is very much worth visiting. But Argos itself, and the centre of Argos, although interesting, here we have a statue of Hercules, for example, and a new fountain, isn't amazing. But there are 2 or 3 things in Argos which are absolutely stunning. And if you're in the area, I would absolutely come to see them. Now let's be clear, I love Argos. I think it's hugely underrated as a town. It's got 7,000 years of history, and the people, I have to say, are amazing. But the centre is like any Greek town nowadays. It's not impressive. What is impressive are firstly Larissa Castle. Larissa in ancient times actually meant acropolis, and there's 3,000 years of history in this castle. And the second are the Roman ruins here in Argos. But let's look at each separately. On the face of it, Larissa Castle, built on a hill 287 metres above Argos, is a 13th to 15th century Frankish castle. But look more carefully at the architecture and you can see that this is a much more ancient place. The medieval outer wall here, for example, is built around Cyclopean architecture dating from around 500 to 600 BC, and the citadel, the centre of the castle, dates back 3,500 years, as we're now going to see. Larissa Castle itself is free to visit and easy to drive to. Just don't follow Google Maps, follow the road signs. And inside the citadel, it looks like a medieval castle. In Greek history, this castle is most famous for a siege prior to a famous battle called Dervenachia, and here we can see the system which would have held the water during the siege itself. Looking round the castle, we see tantalising glimpses of the past, such as this Roman column. And indeed, if we look very carefully, here we stumble upon a wall built just inside the existing curtain wall of the citadel, and this wall is 3,500 years old. It demonstrates that Mycenaeans had an acropolis on this hill, and indeed Larissa translates in ancient language apparently as acropolis, and an acropolis was a fortress. So 3,500 years ago there was a fortress built by the Mycenaeans on this hill, and here in fact in front of us we see the temple of Athena, and then to the right of this, demonstrating, I think, some rocks probably taken from the temple itself, we see an old Byzantine church from about 1300. And this is completely ruined now, but you can see it's still venerated in its history as a church itself. Just behind the church, there is a break in the medieval curtain wall, and this allows us to see that actually here we can look at the cross-section of the medieval wall compared to the wall that the Argolians built in about 600 to 500 BC. And the standards of building 1,500 years prior to the medieval period were substantially better than the medieval wall itself. Coming outside the castle, outside the citadel itself, we can see just how impressive, however, these medieval walls are. Slightly rebuilt recently by the government, but fantastic. And walking along the wall, we can see the 3 periods of development. We have the medieval castle from about 1300 to 1500. Below that, we have the Argolian castle, built in about 600 BC, round about the time that the Argolians beat the Spartans. And then at the foot of this wall, we can see the original Mycenaean wall or foundation of the wall as it is now, built in about 1600 BC by the Mycenaeans. So we have here 3,500 years of continual fortification and occupation on the hill of Larissa itself above Argos, and it's just fantastic when you come and look at it and you understand a little bit of what you're looking at and a little bit of the history. Otherwise it's just a pile of rocks, but I think in this shot in particular you can see the 3 periods of Greek history: Mycenaean, classical and medieval. And then looking down the hill I spotted these Roman ruins. These are completely unmaintained by the government, and I read TripAdvisor reviews of the castle saying it's unmaintained. It's not. This is unmaintained. This is what unmaintained looks like. This demonstrates why Argos is so underrated, and I wish the council would do something with the place because it's got so much if you explore. You just have to look for it. This is the sanctuary of Apollo and Athena. Built in about the 4th century BC, all that remains are the monumental steps that we see here up to the first terrace, but there were 2 or 3 terraces, and what you've got to imagine here was these steps led up to a temple, possibly an oracle, and there's also a covered cistern, as we'll see in a few minutes. These steps are impressive, just like other Roman ruins we'll see in a few minutes, because they're physically carved out of the bedrock. They are not rocks which have been carved and then laid down, but actually cut into the hill itself. And this would have been a ceremonial and a religious site. Here we see the cistern, which was apparently originally covered, and again a source of water for possibly this area and the town itself. But I find it very frustrating because this area is completely unmaintained, and yet it has so much history and potential for the government and the council and Argos if someone would just do something with it. Moving on, at the foot of Larissa Hill is the old Roman town of Argos, and this is maintained by the council and the government. It costs €4 to enter, and I would highly recommend it. If you go to Mycenae or Nafplio and you have a chance, come here, because you can see the Roman town of Argos itself. Amazing. Much of the old Roman town still exists as ruins. Here we see the original public Roman baths. The archaeology and the construction is completely different, of course, to Mycenae. Here we have the Argos Theatre. There are actually 2 theatres here. There was a small one with 2,500 people, and this one which held 20,000 people. And this one is cut into the bedrock of the hill itself. It's not stones which have been cut and laid down. This is actually physically cut into the bedrock of the hill. It's amazing. And at the time, it was the largest theatre in Greece. Forget Athens, forget Epidavros. It was the largest here. And you only get a sense of the scale as you actually walk up and you realise just how far up the hill this goes. And you can see, as I said, cut out of the bedrock with Argos as it stands nowadays laid out before you. But not only do you have the Roman baths and 2 Roman theatres here, you also have the old ancient Agora. And it's maybe not as exciting as the theatre and the baths, but it's still fascinating. And as with all Greek sites, Greek historical or archaeological sites, it's very well laid out, very well explained with these tablets that you see. You can get a real feeling for the Roman history of Greece here in Argos, which itself was as far from the foundations of the castle on the hill, the Mycenaean foundations, as we are almost from Rome itself. So I think Argos is hugely underrated. If you have a chance to visit, if you're in the area and you want to do a little bit of research on Greek history, it is the place to come. You can see 3,500 years of Greek history in a town that has been here 3,500 years before the Mycenaeans. There are few places in Greece which are as beautiful or as exciting. And if you have a chance, please come and visit because it's amazing. I hope you've enjoyed my video, and I'll see you again soon.